Proposed governance and organisational support for transition. You'll see that this paper's been substantially reworked, so to avoid the setting it up as a formal committee, but just to reinforce the governance working group that exists at the moment. We thought it was important to bring a paper back so that it was very public, the process that we were using, but there is no delegation of decision making at all, so all of the decisions come back here to council, and actually with the time frame that we've got, we can call council together very quickly if we need to make decisions. It is going to be a tight time frame, because if you consider the transitional arrangements that we're entering into, the recovery strategy had an ambitious target of a transition plan to be in place by April 2015, and of course with a number of changes that have occurred over recent times, I think that's a challenging time frame, but certainly the transitional board that I'm a member of, it certainly is very focused on the need to provide support into the development of such a transition, and of course the council itself is going to have to be very alert and prepared for taking back some of the core functions of the council over a period of time, because I don't think that there's going to be a waiting period, you know, like let's wait till April 2016 and then just hand things out to other things. I think there's going to be a gradual move of various functions back into the organisational architecture that supports them over the next year and possibly longer. So it's very important that we have people focused on transition, and the Chief Executive is establishing a transition team to focus resources on this key work program, and I think that's very positive. And for us to be able to use the governance working group that we've already established with the chairs of our committees, Mayor, Deputy Mayor and Finance spokesperson, I think that it's a good team to be working together with the management of the organisation as we look at both the governance and organisational support for the transition period. So, I mean, I feel that this has moved on from where we were last time that we brought the paper here, and possibly I had a view that we would have to make decisions quickly, but actually we don't. We really need to be providing the organisation with a steer, and through our committees and through our various networks around the council table, we can get the input of everyone into what that might look like. So I would like to move the staff recommendation. Do I have a seconder for that? Paul Lonsdale? Yep.
Just, with regard to the workload that this could actually entail for some of the people that will be on that panel, it does have a small concern of mine that there is going to place extra workload on some of these people. I just wanted to raise it as a potential issue.
Yeah, I don't think that there's no. I mean, you know, people would put their hands up for the effort, for the work that it's going to entail. But as I say, it's always coming back to council, and I think, you know, it's not a question of others not having input. It's a question of having a very quick turnaround just for a steer in terms of direction, because you've got officials working with officials, you've got the governance of various organisations working with the governance of organisations, you've got the Transition Advisory Board providing a separate stream of advice. We will be consulted as a council on the transitional arrangements as well, and that's quite separate from the advice that's being sought from the Transition Advisory Board. So I just think it's a good way of making sure that we're on top of all of the issues, and I'm really supportive of having a transition team that reporting directly to the Chief Executive. Glenn.
Just if I may make a comment, and I do want to be positive, I support the people there, you know, no question, and you as my colleagues. If it's not at this point, I would like some kind of recognition of the 4 return councillors, because we were, voted back in by the community with confidence. In some respects, we went through the fires of hell in the previous council, but we did actually survive, and I think we bring experience and institutional knowledge. So I think at some point, if it's not with this group, with some other, we have a very keen interest in transitioning back to full kind of sovereignty in the city. But as I said, look, I support the people on there. I don't have an issue with those there, but from time to time, I do question those who aren't there in some of these key decision-making roles.
Helpful, thank you. Yanni.
Are there going to be minutes and agendas available? Because one of the things I've found frustrating is that I appreciate that the group's giving direction, but I think it's important that we know what the content of meetings are, so that if we're not on that group and we've got things we want raised and discussed, then we have an opportunity to do that before meetings with ministers or whoever takes place. So I just feel really uncomfortable that there's still no clear reporting back framework, and it's not just the reporting back framework, there's no clear way in which this group gets direction from the wider collective of council. So will there be minutes?
Well, 5.1.3 requires management provide council with regular updates on progress around the transition program, and that final decisions be made by the full council.
Yeah, I'm not happy
There's
with
regular
that. It doesn't give
updates.
enough certainty. Like, I would expect that the agendas should be available to all councillors and the minutes should be made available as well.
But
Is that possible?
These aren't minuted meetings. These aren't formal meetings of council.
Or something.
Yeah, well, notes can be made available. Of course they can.
An agenda?
Yeah.
It's important for management as we work through these processes at different levels of the organisation, just to make sure that we're on the right track, that if there are issues, we know what to bring back and how to deal with some issues that might come up. So it's really for us really a group just to provide a steer on some of those things. But it would be my commitment that we would have regular updates, and we could do a weekly update of what's going on across the organisation and some of the decisions that might need to be made, as well as formal reporting back to the council on a regular basis.
If I give you a really tangible example, like terms of reference for an external party to come in and review council companies, is that a report that comes to council, or does this group just give direction on those terms of reference?
Oh, well,
Sorry?
we might talk to the group about, is this something that we need to do, develop formal terms of reference or to go ahead of this sort of thing. And this is what we're thinking. Is that the right direction, as opposed to actually saying, signing off on terms of reference or anything like that? That would then come to the council.
So, okay, and what's the process for us who aren't on that group to raise issues around the direction that things are going in?
Well, I think either through the council or even directly with me, as leading the transition team, we need to have all of that input, and in the way that you do now.
But it's not really working now, is my point.
Jimmy?
Thank you, Mayor. Two questions.
Oh, he had his hand up ages ago.
Okay. First one is I support this one in principle. However, I'm concerned because as a councillor, our role and functions not only for decision making, but also providing advice or guidance and direction, etc. But in here, I'm not sure what kind of channel for other councillors, because in here, mayor, deputy mayor, and 4 councillors, but still have more than half, 8 councillors. I'm not sure which channel this councillor have an opportunity to provide advice and strategic direction to the new transitional team. Second question is, what's the criteria to distinguish what kind of issue is to be under this guidance, advice, or direction, or what kind of issue has to be made in a full council meeting? I have a little bit confused, so whether CEO can reply to me.
That's hard to say. So, I mean, at the moment I have a number of informal conversations. If something's coming up and to get some sort of direction or thinking, is my thinking right for the organisation? And so what this does is just find a place for that on a regular basis to be able to make sure that we're on the right track. But the formal processes continue. So it will be my responsibility is to keep the full council briefed on issues and any decisions, and to discuss some of the directions as well. So that will happen. This is really on a, if you like, a daily or a weekly basis to actually make sure that things are continuing to flow and that we don't get stuck in areas without some sort of direction and guidance.
Pauline?
This is on the 5.1.3. And Carleen, thank you. You suggested weekly updates, so perhaps we could swap regular for weekly in the wording.
Yep. Andrew?
I certainly take the concerns that have been raised by councillors, and I think communication is absolutely the key to this. So whilst there's a weekly update, as we've now got in here, and I welcome that, and whilst all the decisions are now, the substantive decisions are to be made by council, I think there's definitely a responsibility on the part of the members of this working group to communicate with the wider group of councillors, just as there's a responsibility on the wider group of councillors to be communicating any concerns to the people on that group as well. The inputs and the outputs are important, so in as much as it's good to have that weekly update, it's also important for those that are on that working group to have the concerns of councillors to take to that meeting, or to have a good feel for where people are at, so that we can bring that into the discussion at those meetings. Nimbleness and the ability to work quickly is the key, but I think more important than that is that two-way conversation with the whole group, in terms of not only the outputs, not only reporting what's happened after the event, but the input, where possible, been able to circulate those things which are to be discussed prior to the discussion, so that all councillors can have some input into that discussion. And we certainly have a responsibility to take all of those concerns and issues to that table.
Jamie? Jamie?
Look, I was just going to say with this, I just think we should really get on with it. This isn't a conspiracy to take over the world. I always talk about governance and management, but in that transition there is that slight overlap at times. So just in a situation like this, I'm actually just surprised that it's here, because it's really just saying that can provide a bit of guidance. You've got the chairs of the committees. It's a small group that chair it. That is reflective of the committee that's made up there. And then Raf's effectively abdicated as chair of audit and risk, so we could have an independent there with a outside experience, but is also the finance spokesperson. So I think it's appropriate there, mayor and deputy mayor. I think that's going to be a pretty good representation by and large. Look, I sit on the board of CCHL. I'm a chair, V-Base. I'm on the finance committee, on audit and risk, on the community one. The last thing I want is to be on another committee or anything, because I work hard with all the things that I do. For the ones that are prepared to go in there and articulate the views to help us move forward, great. But in all honesty, we're even lucky that it's even here. Because you could have this informal chat anyway, and it could have just gone ahead. It's been open, it's been transparent, and said, hey, this is what we're planning on doing, so we can move forward in a positive way. And now we end up with this blimmin' licorice all sorts thing, where because from a good gesture to be very transparent about having informal dialogue, we then end up with all these things added to it. That you start having minutes and coming back with weekly updates and everything, and it kind of undoes the entire purpose of this. So this is a moment where I sit here, which is the pet hate with council, and it's the designing the horse by committee and ending up with the camel. The entire purpose of this is now slightly being lost, and at the beginning I actually totally understand why it was being done, and it makes sense. So I was happy with the recommendation that was there.
Well, can I just comment on that? Because I think that's a really good point, and that is that Carleen and I have had a conversation about the nature of developing reporting back to council. So when you say provides the council with weekly updates, the council doesn't meet weekly. The council meets fortnightly. So I think it's actually quite important that we think about whether we're asking for a formal report back or an informal report back. And in a way, the regular updates was designed to create a sense of informality with the capacity to bring for formality decisions that had to be made into this arena. the reason that it's here as a paper is that it was originally on the agenda as a with delegated powers and a subcommittee status under the Local Government Act, which meant publicly notified meetings, etc., with the capacity to make decisions on a relatively quick basis. The idea was a degree of nimbleness and a degree of flexibility. It is true, we didn't need to bring this back because we can do this without the authority of the council. I thought that a good idea would be to explain what happened to the paper before and why we decided not to go for a full delegated decision-making body, but rather to have a governance working group working closely with a transition team that the Chief Executive is setting up. So we're not asking for permission for the Chief Executive to do her job. That is her job, and that's what we've required her to do. We have got a process in place that central government essentially controls, which is the development of the transition plan. We have more than one way of entering into a degree of influence over the way that transition plan is shaped. And, you know, I detect a note of hesitation from some councillors to actually see that as an opportunity, which I think is a shame. Tim?
This is the perfect opportunity, I think, for our informal meetings, just to have that update. And that's,
Yeah.
we've talked about communication. The whole thing about this and all the questions actually relate to communication. I have absolutely no problem with this at all, because I think this should actually be included in our Monday informal. And
Yeah.
whether it's fortnightly or weekly or whatever, and
No,
whenever it's
all I was
required.
saying was that providing the council with a capital C
Yes,
is a
absolutely.
formal report to the council. So I think that, you know, I mean, totally, I mean, we've already committed to the weekly reporting on the informal basis. So, you know, I just think it's a shame that, but it doesn't matter. We can leave it like this, but it's...
We could put informal in there, if you like. That's, you know, I agree with Tim. Yeah, and
with
weekly informal updates.
weekly informal updates. All right. We're going to have to, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to close the meeting because we have to go. I mean, there is no room for movement here. We've got... Eh? No, look, can I just comment on that? Because, no, I get a little bit frustrated by, you know, throwaway comments. This is a private company that has organised an opening to coincide with the presence of the Prime Minister in town. I'm sure he didn't look at the council agenda. We are not in control of this. The fact that he has invited me to speak at the opening is a pleasure. And colleagues wanted to attend as well, and so I decided to allow for that to occur by adjourning the meeting. So, I mean, unless people are willing to vote on this now, as it is, as a one, if people are... So, sorry?
To add that we get circulated with the agenda and the notes.
There isn't an agenda. We're not talking about a formal process. We're talking about the capacity to meet and discuss matters as they arrive. It's ad hoc. It's like the insurance subcommittee.
Well, how many people know what's happening there?
Madam Mayor, this is like kindergarten. Let's just move it. I'm sorry, it's just frustrating sitting here with it.
No. Shush. We'll do it when we come back then. Right. I would have liked to have done it now, but are we able to do it now? Right. Well, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No? Was that a no? And you'd like that recorded? Yanni Johansson, opposed. Right, that's carried. And I'll adjourn the meeting and we'll start again at 11:45.